Well, folks, thanks for joining us again today and joining the growing number of people who are tuning in and finding in that Stockwell day-to-day news helps them save time by looking at the main items that are happening around the world, in Canada and the US also, and at the same time giving a bit of a sneak behind-the-scenes view of what is behind some of the major headlines. So stay with us today. We're going to cover, of course, some items to do with the budget and why the Canadian government didn't fall. You're going to hear about a country that wants to swap their wine for our oil. How about cows and milk without cows? You like the sound of that? More about the snowbirds, Canadians, and going to the U.S. or not going to the U.S. And did you know that China may be spying on your child through some of those AI toys you could be buying for Christmas? Wow. Let's take a look at this. Of course, the budget is the big story. We predicted, if you were watching here, regular watchers, listeners, and readers on my X-File will know that I've said for some time the budget is not going to cause the government to fall, that the government is going to survive. There will be ways to do this, and that most MPs, well, last thing they want is putting their constituencies, their seats, and their paychecks up at risk at so early in the mandate. The NDP, the Socialist Party in Canada, were the ones, or the one that kind of took it across the line. The Liberals only needed 2 votes to make sure they could stave off a non-confidence vote. And the NDP always have a bit of an area of, I'm talking about the politicians, not people who are socialists, who generally tend to be nice people, just sadly uninformed on the destructive effects of socialism. But the NDP, of course, took on their usual sanctimonious tone in terms of saying, they didn't, or the MP who was involved, they made a decision not to cause the government to fall over the budget because they're thinking about Canadians and they're not like all the other MPs voting for selfish reasons. So a little strange on that, and they don't seem to be as concerned with supporting a government that is literally making life poorer and tougher for working people. All of that aside, here we go. We're going to continue on. And it's a kind of an interesting thing that when we talk about the budget, and when we talk about, you hear terms like debt and deficit. Most of us understand what debt is. We get that. But most people don't understand the significance and the seriousness of things like deficit. The deficit, that's the difference every year between what you spend and what you take in. So if you at home, if you are spending more money every month than you're taking in, each month, that's a deficit. That deficit adds up every month, and that increases your debt. A debt requires financing from the banker. If you take out a loan of any kind, as you know, at the bank, you are going to be responsible to make payments on that loan. Some of it is the loan itself, and some of it is the interest payment. That's how banks, that's how bond dealers make their money. Canada's debt is so large now that the annual payment on the debt, all right, this is just the payment on the debt. This isn't even lowering the debt. It's $50 billion a year. Now you might say, well, $50 billion, how do I even know what that is? Look at it this way. This year, the federal government will spend $30 billion, that's a lot of money, $30 billion on the Department of National Defense. $30 billion on the Department of National Defense. $50 billion on interest payment to bankers because the federal government will not show the discipline to get its spending under control. Or think of it this way. As you know, the federal government, though it's not directly responsible for health care, provinces are, every year the federal government gives what's called a Canadian health transfer. That's a certain amount of money every year to provinces to help them with the increasing demands on the healthcare system. That transfer to all provinces and territories is about $51 billion. Almost the same as we are evaporating every year, just paying the interest payments on the interest on our debt, a debt that the federal government refuses to wrestle under control. So think about it in that terms. And there's an officer in Parliament, actually Stephen Harper's government instituted the the parliamentary budget officer. This is an independent position. This person is paid to give an independent view and analysis every year of government spending. And it's arm's length from government, so this person does not have to worry about saying nice things just to protect his job. His job is to be like any auditor that would be hired in the private sector to evaluate a business for its shareholders. And as you know, though the mainstream media and certainly the subsidized media in Canada didn't give it much coverage, when he looked at the budget and the spending profile and the significance of our deficit, he said it's not sustainable. He looked at this budget numbers of the Liberal government of Prime Minister Carney's budget. He said it's unsustainable, folks. And, you know, mainstream media quickly touched on that, but they buried it. If you want to go and check on my X site, if you subscribe to X, you'll see somebody there who gives a very good expose on this. You might want to take a look at that. But this is the problem. We've got a growing debt. The deficit, there is no plan that's going to take it to zero, and those payments that we're making are just eating up in other areas. Just think, it's the same amount that's going to healthcare. If we didn't have that deficit, your province, wherever you live, your territory would have twice the amount of money for healthcare than it does right now, and it's all because of a lack of willingness and fortitude to wrestle the spending under control. So keep all of this in mind as we move forward. In the area of trade with Canada, the South African High Commissioner, that's the same as Ambassador, the South African High Commissioner, a gentleman by the name of Riaz Schalk, has approached Canada and approached our Trade Department and said, hey, how about we get into a deal, a swap of South African wine for Canadian fossil fuel products. Wine for oil, more specifically, he's saying South African wine for natural gas. Now listen, I won't get into the ongoing rivalry between Okanagan wine growers and Niagara wine growers. I know some people in the Okanagan, when they drink the Okanagan wine, they say it tastes like natural gas, but that's really an unfair shot. It's a pretty good product too. But I want you to think about this for a minute. What the South African ambassador is saying, look, they grow grapes and they grow and make a ton of wine, but they desperately need energy. They need power to get out of poverty. They need to be able to have factories like we have. They need to be able to have the type of roads and infrastructure, and they can't get it because they don't have natural resources. And he's saying Canada has liquid natural gas. It could help us. It would help our health. It would help South Africa turn away from the huge poverty issues they face and health issues. You know what? It's the same request being made to Canada from India. I've talked about this before, how millions and millions of people in India live, subside on, their homes are heated by, and their food is cooked with heat and energy made from factories that use 100% cow dung to produce that energy. And again, we deprive Europe of our natural gas because of the extreme environmentalists that still have way too much influence on mainstream media and are saying, you know, our liquid natural gas, even that well-refined product, is going to kill the world. It's not. More and more scientific studies every single day showing the world is not going to be ending because of climate change. We always have issues with climate, and we should be looking to keep climate and our natural environments clean and protected. But quite literally, liquid natural gas from Canada will help entire continents from around the world reduce their need on things like coal. Our liquid natural gas will reduce global emissions and will increase prosperity for Canadians, certainly for First Nations groups, many First Nation groups that want to partner with other companies in terms of pipelines to do this. But we have politicians who are so in abject fear of being criticized by the left and being criticized by subsidized organizations like the CBC that we are literally causing the rest of the world to suffer, to suffer from lack of energy, to suffer from emissions that are literally killing people. We won't help Europe break the stranglehold that Putin has on Europe in terms of Europe having to buy oil and gas from Russia. Europeans are literally funding Putin's war on Ukraine, and Canada could be a clear factor in reducing that stranglehold, maybe even ending the war. But you need to look at your elected people and ask if they are part of this myth that the world is going to end. And even if you believed that myth, even if you believed it, which is not true, but even if you did, the world will last longer if we allow the pipelines to be built to get our liquid natural gas and other products to countries in dire need. It is selfish. It is intellectually depraved, because there's no scientific basis for the argument of locking in our natural gas, our fossil fuels. Folks, think about that, and think about the ambassador, the high commissioner from South Africa saying, please help us. And really, talk to your politicians about this. We are the answer. We could be the answer to so many of the world's problems. Talking about wine, let's shift to milk. Increasingly, there are some breakthroughs being made, for those of you who are interested, in milk that's made without cows. Now, hang on to that for a minute. It's actually milk product because it's made from the mammary cells, the milk cells of cows, but it's largely milk being made, produced in massive quantities to feed millions of people, and doing it without cows. Think of that, because as you know, again, the environmentalists saying, and sorry if there's anybody, of tender ears when I say the word cow farts, that the left has said cow farts are one of the biggest problems in terms of climate change. This would eliminate cows. And the product, one of the products is called Remilk. It's on the shelves in Israel, and a byproduct of that product is actually on shelves in Canada in different forms. It's not full wholesale being sold yet, and that's partly because the dairy industry is quite literally and understandably fully panicked when we think of the possibility of milk for millions and without cows. The health components, the nutrients, the protein are all higher than plant-based products. So this is eliminating inputs on whether you are looking at plant-based or whether you're looking at cow-based, significantly reducing the inputs and the outputs in terms of emissions. What this is going to do, and this is going to carry on, Indonesia has also products, and all the testing and the consumer testing is you cannot tell the difference. And it's every bit as healthy as the pharmacists who are analyzing it say. Anyway, that's what's being said. So the test is going to come here. All the people who are been screaming about the Paris Agreement and COP30, doing everything we can to stop using any kind of energy at all to save the world from extinction. Now that, think about this, if you don't need cows, and increasingly less cows are being needed to produce milk, and that will continue in a dramatic way, that means there's no more cow farts going up there. That means that even if you believe the models which are false about the end of the world because of climate change, the world will last longer with Canada's liquid natural gas. It'll last longer than what's currently be done, and more room for emissions is being opened up by scientific breakthroughs, not the least of which is in the area of new forms of milk. Talk about being milked. A report has just come out in the province of Ontario, and it's referring to and looking at insurance rates and comparing insurance rates between young male drivers and young female drivers. And I don't know why, these reports come out and media seems startled and surprised. Hold on, folks, put on your seatbelt on this one. Guess what? Young male drivers tend to be more reckless than young female drivers. For some reason, that shocks some people. Look, I have sons. We have granddaughters and grandsons. We've seen them growing up and learning how to drive. I remember back in the years when I was learning how to drive and with my friends, hold on, don't get upset, don't get insulted here, but guys, overall, young men are stupider drivers, more stupid than women. Women, young female drivers, in most cases, tend to be more careful, tend to be more concerned about others on the road. Young men tend not to be. Now, the reason this is a problem even saying this, there are so many people, as you know, there's an entire school of thought that says there's really, other than some physical difference, there's no differences between men and women, boys and girls in terms of characteristics. Well, that just gets proven wrong if it had to be time and time and time again. And the situation now is that, quite rightly, young men are in a high-risk group because they drive poorer, and they should have to pay higher insurance rates. I said that to my sons when they were getting to the age of driving, and they had their girlfriends, and they looked at the rates that the girls they knew were paying, and this was at the time, and the rate that young men were paying, and they were saying to me, that's not fair. It's not fair that we have to pay more than girls. Yes, it is fair. You've decided to drive like somebody in a high-risk group, then you're going to pay the cost for that. It's just like people in their 50s get to pay a lower insurance rate, as long as their accident record is clear, than somebody in their 20s. That's the way it goes. Insurance is based on that. And we made the mistake when I was serving in the province of Alberta. We actually caved into this ridiculous argument about those who are fearful that there should be any indication ever that there's differences between men and women, boys and girls. And we changed the insurance rates to allow for guys to have lower rates and girls to be punished. Young women had to pay higher rates to compensate for the stupid driving habits of young men. And I'm saying to the legislators in Ontario, don't fall for that. It's quite a difference. Young men in Ontario right now, just over $3,000 a year. Sorry, $13,000 a year they're paying for insurance if they're in one of those high risk rates. Young women of the same age paying about $9,000 a year, significantly different. You will get assessed partly in terms of the group you're in, and then of course your own rates. So Ontario, don't cave in to the ridiculous argument that boys and girls, men and women are the same when it comes to driving. And anybody who has kids know this, they are not. Let's see if the government of Ontario bows down to the false science on that. So after the budget passed, and as I predicted, been predicting for some time, the government would not fall. Once again, the media was able to, they do two things, mainstream media. Other independent media are more honest in this regard, and that's why you should be consulting independent media rather than exclusively the media that's getting funded by your tax dollars. And once again, the mainstream media turning their guns on Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the official opposition, the Conservative Party of Canada, and just wailing away. And it's rarely on the politics and it's rarely on the policies. They try to avert people's attention to the policies which are fiscally responsible, policies which will lower taxes, policies which will lead to more prosperity for more people. They stay away from those because they know they're vulnerable, and they try and go after on a personality basis, the way somebody talks, the way they walk, the way they, whatever it is, comb their hair, it doesn't matter. But what they can't escape, and so that does have an effect on conservative voters and on people in the Conservative Party. They start to say, well, maybe we should switch leaders. Look, I've said this before, look at the history. Any conservative leader, doesn't matter who it is going to get viciously attacked almost daily, and rarely on policy, mostly on emotive personal items by the mainstream media. Because mainstream media, being culturally Marxist, they don't understand, nor do they want policies that truly create prosperity. So the attacks will continue, and you put in a new leader, I'm saying to this conservative, put in a new leader, you're going to get the exact same thing. There'll be that little honeymoon period, and then within about a year, the same attacks, as long as that leader is truly conservative. If the leader turns out to be actually liberal and soft on all of these social and fiscal issues, then the mainstream media will be a little bit nicer to them. So put away the dream, the imagination, the fantasy that you bring in a new leader and the media is going to be nicer. Mainstream media will be nicer and kinder to him or her. No, they won't. Stay focused, stay on it. And one thing mainstream media hates to focus on and hates to mention right now, apparently with this leadership of Pierre Poilievre that mainstream media says is not great, there's only about a 2% difference in terms of voting intentions. So the media always come out saying, oh, look at this, Prime Minister Carney, his popularity rates are through the roof. Well, that certainly didn't show up at the Grey Cup game. He was booed louder than any prime minister has been booed in history. Anyway, putting aside that nasty little fact, the fact is voter intention is very close, very tight. And that's why we say stick with the program, stick with those principles that make economies strong, that lower prices, that make housing affordable. Stick with those and reduce crime. Stick with those. Don't get into the trick of just dump your leader because CBC doesn't like him or her. Talking about CBC, they were down in Florida and just talking. They did an interview. I love how they do their systematic interviews. CBC has always really despised the United States of America and has despised Americans. It's just part of the CBC DNA. It goes back forever. And again, they do this interview with a woman who's genuinely concerned. She's coming to Florida for years, according to the interview that was just done. And she says, well, because of the bad feeling that she has towards the administration now, meaning President Trump, she's made a change. Even though she likes her friends and her friends like her U.S. friends, they still love her. Because she's upset with who the president is, she's taking her business and her tourism months in the winter to Mexico. Listen, first of all, entirely her right to do that. Absolutely, I support her right to travel wherever she wants to. But think about this for a minute. First of all, in terms of traveling or holidays or vacation or where I'm going to spend time, I can't think of a time where my decision was based on who the prime minister of that country is. I look at and my wife and I and family, we evaluate for a number of reasons. Is it going to be warm in winter? Is there going to be exciting places to see? Do they have good activities? All of these things weigh in. Are their prices good? And here, more and more Canadians, with their minds infected by what comes out of the subsidized national media, are making a decision. She's making a decision to go, as many Canadians do, to Mexico. Again, I have no issue with that whatsoever. But there, your dollars, your tax dollars, will be going to support a government, national government, and this is nothing against the people of Mexico, but a national government that is well acknowledged, very, very high on the United Nations corruption index, very corrupt government, not all of the politicians, but very high overall, very much involved with drug trade, not as much as Venezuela government, but very much involved. And because this person, and I guess thousands of other Canadians, don't like the President of the United States, they're going to go and support that government. Entirely their right to do that, but I wish people would think it through. And of course, I talk to Canadians often, many Canadians who say, we made a decision, we're going to go, guess where? Because we don't like the US government, we're going to go to Cuba and take their hard-earned tax dollars and support one of the most vicious, one of the most impoverishing communist governments in the world, human rights record that is deplorable, standard of living that is awful. Once you get, especially out of Havana, which is about as far as CBC usually goes when they do these interviews, you find out their education system is in turmoil. You find out their healthcare system. When we were there not that long ago, a few years ago, on an agriculture mission, all the people we met in the rural areas, we went with them to the grocery stores where there's the main product that's on the shelf is rum. You can buy Cuban rum for $1 for a 26 ouncer. But other than that, too often the shelves are bare. They tell us that the doctors are so poor. If you want medical treatment out in any of those areas, once you get out of the so-called trophy city of Havana, which is there for display purposes, you have to pay for health care. So Canadians, you have the right. Everybody has the right to make wrong choices. Everybody has the right to make choices that are not based on common sense. You have the right to do that, but try and give it a little thought. Anyway, enjoy wherever you choose. So this Christmas, if you're going to be buying the increasingly AI-generated toys, especially the ones that come from China, Newsweek magazine and some significant departments in the United States are reporting that among the 1,500 or so companies that are selling products, especially the fun, fuzzy, warm and fuzzy little animal products, they're incredibly sophisticated. If you've seen any of these, I'm very impressed. They move like little puppies and little rabbits. They make sounds. They respond to the face of the person, the kid looking at them. Really incredible stuff. And increasingly, it's being discovered that because the AI inserts in those animals are generated in China, China is able to recover biometric data, actually from the kids, and is able to have unique means of harvesting data from the environment. That would be from the room they're in. There's been some of the products that have been looked at that actually, in a very kind of sly way, encourage little kids in directions they shouldn't be going. A lot of concern coming up on this about Chinese-based AI fuzzy toys and how that's actually more and more affecting the behavior of children. So think about that. I'm not saying you have the right to buy and do whatever you like. Think about that. Disturbing developments that have just come out the last few days from the FBI and from other intel services in the United States. So if you remember the name Thomas Crooks, this was the guy that almost assassinated President Trump, was almost successful, if you recall that. The bullet grazed the ear of President Trump, and of course the would-be assassin was shot dead in the process. And there's been a lot of pressure saying, why isn't the FBI talking about the personality of the person, the files? They usually are pretty good at digging very deep into the person's postings, etc. And so the reports are now coming out, somewhat reluctantly, that gender dysphoria issues were definitely part of what Thomas Crooks was dealing with. Fascination with furries. You're familiar with these, people who identify more and more as animals and are infatuated by the furries and even by the sexual antics of cartoon animated animals and others. Thomas Crooks definitely involved in that in a significant way. Now the only reason I raise that is because it's also very well known that Tyler Robinson, the guy who assassinated Charlie Kirk, this evidence on him, similar evidence came out very clearly because he posted so openly about it. Also, same sort of gender issues, fascinations and disturbances relative to identity. And again, matching the same pattern, for instance, of the 2023 Nashville shooter. That was very well known because of what the shooter was declaring in their own writings. So the question that we need to be asking ourselves is, are we being open-minded, truly inclusive? When we look at what motivates certain people, what are the motivating factors, and if we discover what those are, can there be ways in which those signs can be identified and the people helped before they actually cave into the impulse of assassinating or of killing somebody? And I'm not even suggesting that it's because of a person's inclination on gender. If they think they're a different gender, does that mean they're going to turn them into a killer? No, I'm not saying that at all. But there is a disproportionate amount of people who are struggling with this that are winding up in these types of crimes. A fair question, for instance, to be asked, because most of the people who are going through changes, especially as related to gender, rely on certain pharmaceuticals to help them with that. And is there something in the psycho drugs that are being used? Is there something there that is lowering a person's inhibitions in terms of wanting to be violent towards another human being? These are fair questions that need to be asked, and prove them wrong if you want. But the very fact that there's a huge, within academia, huge pushback against these factors even being looked into, in spite of the fact that there's mounting evidence saying there's some kind of correlation in some cases. That's all we're saying, and I know people are probably already starting to click and hit their dials of hate, and I'll be looking at some of those comments right after. And I do appreciate your comments, by the way, but just saying these are areas that need to be looked at as more and more of these revelations come forward. Yesterday, we talked about the city of Toronto and how privileged they are, that with all the things that are affecting cities around the world, one of the big items there is the debate on whether you should be allowed to put your dog's poop in somebody else's bin. Leaving that aside, we talked about that yesterday. Now Toronto, with increasing crime rates, home costs through the roof, affordability costs the worst in Canada, addiction rates and homelessness on the streets, highest rates of anywhere in Canada. Huge social problems, and they're celebrating the fact they're going to be raising the Palestinian flag at City Hall in Toronto. First of all, there is not even a state or a nation called Palestine. There are no borders of such a state. And those who are wanting the flag to be raised are known supporters of Hamas. They march and they cry out, from the river to the sea, which means Israel must be destroyed. So most of the people who are involved in that whole movement and wanting the flag raised are to raise up the fact that they don't think Israel has the right to exist as a Jewish state. And here we have the Mayor Chow, supporting all of these causes while the city is literally crumbling around its citizens. All I'll say is, folks, think about that when your mayoralty elections come up. Canada has a prize for literature called the Giller Prize, and this year it goes to, the 2025 prize goes to a book called Pick a Color. And the author is outstanding in their own right because this is the second time of winning this, which is kind of rare. Forgive me if I don't get the name 100% pronounced right here, but it's Suvrakam Shamovanska. I'm sorry, sincerely, if I didn't quite get the right pronunciation there. It's pretty close. And fascinating book because it talks about a woman who's in her previous way of making money. She was a boxer professionally, and now she's reverted over to the industry of nail spa, where you go and get your nails done, nails boutiques. And it's basically a day in the life of somebody in that. And it's really a fascinating approach to looking at what a person in that particular industry, and I don't think the intent is trying to mean the industry, but here's somebody with obviously, some differences in terms of how they look, how they feel, where they came from, and talking about the challenges of being anonymous, of not being seen or appreciated. Interesting that the book, and I don't think there was any collaboration on this, but as you know, one of the big movies that's getting all the attention this year with Sydney Sweeney as the main actress in that movie is the movie called Christie. And again, story about a female boxer, sort of interesting. One of the things that emerges, I believe, that's positive about this book as we're hearing about it, and I have not read it through in its entirety yet, Pick a Color, but it just shows that sometimes we take for granted the people who are doing tasks that we want done, even that we might consider menial, and how you can turn around a person's day with a couple of positive comments, with some real expression of gratitude, and take it one more. Sometimes the person on the receiving end, the person getting their nails, the person's getting their nails done, they've got real issues. And if you're in the trade itself of doing people's nails, maybe sensitivity to their issues can lead to a positive word, an encouraging comment that can make a difference in their particular lives and in their particular day. So pick a thought, pick a color, well awarded Giller Prize. Folks, thanks for tuning in. See you tomorrow.